ideas cannot be protected through any kind of like IP registration. So if you have some idea about a product that you want to launch, or even like a marketing idea, and you want to talk it through with people, that's really the best way to protect it, is to have somebody sign an NDA. And like, I'll get people will say, well, like, I'm just talking, like, I don't want to like shove this paper in front of their face, but that's makes you legitimate, I think, in my eyes. Like, that's what businesses do. Like, you're a business owner now. Like, you have to be able to do that and protect yourself.
Hello. Welcome, beautiful people. I'm so excited to have Antonella Colella here with us. Actually, I'm going to redo that intro because I don't want to mess up your name. Okay. So let me go back. All right. Hector, if you could take that part out. Hello. Welcome, beautiful people, to a new episode here at Beauty and the Brand. I'm so excited to have here with me Antonella Colella. She is the founder and attorney at Colella Legal Studios, and she is a beauty brand trademark attorney. Welcome, Antonella.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I know. I'm so happy to have you here because Antonella and I have now known each other. You know, we've both been in the beauty industry, in the beauty space for a few years now, and it's been such a treat to work alongside of you. And you've supported so many of our brands, including my own.
Yes.
And so it's been a treat to watch you do the magic that you do. So can you, we're going to dive right in. So tell me a little bit more about how did you get into the beauty space, as an attorney? I remember when we first met, I think you had just left corporate and you were, working on starting your own firm. How did you end up getting involved in the beauty space, and like what drew you to represent beauty brands in particular?
Yeah. So I started my own practice in 2021. That's like, actually, I think we might have met right before I
right there.
The leap. And so I had worked in a corporate setting as an attorney. I worked in law firms, and the last job I had before jumping out, I started representing a beauty brand, and I just loved everything about it. I loved it from the beginning to the end, and we really started with them with even just the foundation of the business, which launching the LLC, getting the contracts together, doing the branding, the trademark, and then working on them with their manufacturing agreement. So it was like really the whole life cycle. And I was like, I really like this. And, at that point, I mean, I've been an attorney now for 15 years. You just kind of, after a point, you say like, it's a part of it is burnout. Part of it is like, is this really what I want to be doing? And so I said, this is the time to leap and start my own thing. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to work with people that I like. I want to work with clients that I like to work with. And so I just was always putting myself in places and in situations where I would meet these types of clients. And I'm so happy that I met you. Like, that was just such a great timing. And we connected, and I was really able to, help a lot of, your brands. And it's been great, because I do get people say, wow, I've never heard of a lawyer that does, beauty law or that really understands my industry. Or they'll say, I did have an attorney, but he didn't understand, anything about what I was doing. So
exactly.
So it's nice. I mean, I love it. I'm really loving having that impact, and just helping brands to just kind of grow and launch. And it's been really awesome.
What did it feel like to take that leap, having been, working at another firm for, you said 15 years, and then taking that huge leap of faith, to start your own firm? Like, what did that feel like? Talk me through that.
Yeah. So it was the middle of the pandemic. It was January of 2021. And looking back, it was kind of crazy. Like I was kind of crazed that I did that because I just leapt and just took a chance. And I said, like, this is the time. I was like late 30s, and I just said, like, this is it. Like, I have to do this now. I did always want to have my own business. And it just seemed like that was it. That was the time to do it.
So you just leapt and you didn't look back.
No, and I didn't look back. Exactly.
That's incredible. So that was 2021. So that was about 3.5 years ago.
Yep.
So tell me more about, when you mentioned this first brand that you worked with them from start to finish. Can you walk me through, like, what are those steps? What steps did you take from beginning to end with this particular brand? Just
Yeah.
so our audience can understand and have a bigger scope of what does trademarking entail, because it's more than just your mark, right? There's so
Right.
many other aspects to starting a brand from the legal side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so for this particular business, I mean, and the thing to know, so just as background, I've been a business attorney, right? All this time, all these years, I've always worked with businesses and really done transactional work. I never did litigation. And so beauty is a business. Like, these brands are businesses that you're running and that you're growing. So you need to do and follow the correct steps to do it correctly and have that legal foundation. So, like, for this particular brand, we needed to form the entity. I mean, that's the first thing. This was two partners. It was like two people. So even more so, you need to file, and have a partnership agreement, an operating agreement to say, okay, this is how we're going to run this business. These are the percentages that each person owns. And this is kind of how we're going to do this. So that all needs to be done. And then contracts, there are certain contracts that every business should have. Like, you should have an NDA. Like, everybody should have an NDA. And that's going to help protect your ideas, because ideas cannot be protected through any kind of like IP registration. So if you have some idea about a product that you want to launch, or even like a marketing idea, and you want to talk it through with people, that's really the best way to protect it, is to have somebody sign an NDA. And like, I'll get people will say, well, like, I'm just talking, like, I don't want to like shove this paper in front of their face, but that's makes you legitimate, I think, in my eyes. Like, that's what businesses do. Like, you're a business owner now. Like, you have to be able to do that and protect yourself.
Absolutely.
So,
and you'd be surprised. I feel like there are, not even that I feel, I know, I see it. I very rarely get asked to sign an NDA.
mm-hmm.
When someone does, I love that, and I'm happy to sign that.
Yeah. I mean,
agreement.
There are, like, unscrupulous people that will just take your idea. Like, I mean, it's absolutely does happen. So, I think, so that's something that I always recommend, just have an NDA. Like, let's get you an NDA so that you can pass it around and just have it. And then there are other contracts, that if they're going to be working with a vendor, or even, an agency, they may be getting contracts that they need to have reviewed. And like, I have some clients that they're even pre-launch, but they've hired me to just help them review all the contracts. I mean, like, sometimes you're getting like 6 to 8 contracts from these consultants and these agencies and these manufacturers that, like, you don't know what's going on with them. So I think that that's great. Like, I love that, people do that, because people just end up signing things that they don't understand.
And they might regret later down the road. Like, especially with manufacturers, there's the whole piece of like, do you own the formula? Do you not own the formula? Like, I'm sure you could speak to that.
Oh my God, that's such an important contract, to have reviewed. And the thing is, when you're new, you're mostly going to be receiving contracts, right? Like, you're mostly going to be getting the contract.
Yes.
You're not so much you're not going to be handing somebody your manufacturing agreement. No, I mean, like, you're not going to do that. So, so it's very important to have them looked at and reviewed and know what you're doing. And yes, like, we can get into manufacturing agreement, but that's something that, like, you need to understand what is in there.
Yes.
So yeah. And then like the branding, the trademark is just so important. Because, and I always say the same thing, but in beauty, it's very crowded. It's a crowded space. And so the thing that is making you stand out is your branding, is your story, and that's trademark. Like trademark is the legal
Mm.
equivalent of branding. That's the way that we protect the brand is through trademark.
Absolutely. So then, speaking on trademarking, what I find often, and I have so much personal experience, and you and I have talked about this many, many times, but oftentimes this is definitely an area that people overlook. So they'll come up with a name. They might be using the name, which is under, I believe it's called under common law, that
Right.
you are protected. And they're using this name, they're selling the brand, they're selling their products. At some point, when I encounter a brand, I immediately can already kind of tell if a brand, even if I haven't checked yet, if that brand has a trademark or not, just because the name might be so like generic,
Yes.
or it doesn't fall into some of those like basic criteria that I'm familiar with, not as an attorney, but just kind of familiar over the years. And there's that piece of it, right? So they haven't trademarked the name, but they've been selling, right?
Yeah.
Or they might have, tried to trademark or started the process of trademarking, but they're trying to do it on their own, or they're trying to do it using like some of the online websites. Like I think LegalZoom is one of them, right?
Right.
And then they're encountering issues there. So talk to me about why trademarking is so important early on, because I can tell my own story and I'm happy to share it, but I think I'd love to hear you touch on like, why is it so important?
Yeah. So this is a huge issue that not enough people understand, because when you are building a brand, if you can't secure that brand name through trademark, the value of your brand is so much lower. Okay. Because trademarking brings value. It's an actual asset of the business. It has a value attached to it. If you are ever going to have investors, if you're ever thinking about selling the business, they're going to value you less because they need that. They need that ownership, that brand ownership, that trademark. So I always say, like, in the beginning, when you're even thinking about names, you haven't done anything yet. I mean, that's the absolute best time. That's when you should at least do a search. At least do the search of the name that you're thinking of. And I usually tell clients, like, give me a couple names, like give me a list of 3 that you're thinking of, and I will tell you which one to do the search on. Like I can tell you, right, this is not a no-go, like absolutely not.
Yeah.
So it's so important, because the worst thing in the world is to have somebody build a brand, grow it, spend all this money, and then they come to me and say, oh, I want to trademark this. It's not going to go through. You're not going to get it. Or even worse, you're infringing. Like, you're the infringer because
Exactly.
you're using somebody else's name, or it's so close to somebody else's name that they can send you a cease and desist letter. And it's just, when you're in the very beginning stages, that's the time to do it, because you can pivot, you can change. You haven't like spent so much time, blood, sweat, and tears. And then it's like devastating if you have to change it later on.
100%. We had that situation for Nomatera, where originally the brand name was Noma. And then we got a cease and desist letter basically saying this is very too similar to another mark. Even though we were a fragrance brand, other brand was a hair care brand. Personally, I don't think it sounded or looked similar, but they felt that was the case. And we were literally one day away from pulling the trigger on getting like 20,000 boxes printed with the name Noma on it, and then 20,000 like fragrance units printed with the name Noma. And like, thank goodness that for whatever reason this happened like right before we pulled the trigger, because we would have been out like thousands of dollars,
right?
Having this name Noma on it, and knowing that we have to change the name. I was attached to the name, and I know this is something you've spoken on before, whenever you've taught inside our inside C2C and our other programming, that don't get attached to the name. Don't get too connected to the name, because
Yeah.
you may have to change it at some point if it isn't trademarked. And that did happen to us, where I was very attached to that Noma name, and then I had to change it to something else. And I think I cried over it for like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and eventually we came up with Noma Terra. And so point in sharing all of that is that this piece is so important, yet so many founders overlook it. I don't know if it's maybe because they don't see themselves as a business just yet.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right?
That happens too. I think they just are kind of like starting out. They don't, I don't know if maybe they don't have the vision, or they don't know yet where they're going, and they just skip that part. A lot of people move towards, like, I notice, like, a lot of like the marketing, like, dollars, which is like important, but then, like, I would, you have to kind of spend money on legal too. And I think people don't want to do that. And then, touching on your point, actually, when you talked about, like, it was like the day before you spent all that money, what, if you get a cease and desist letter, and because you're infringing on somebody else's mark, they can like garnish, like, money. They could say, like, they could demand profits from you, if you've made money from, a certain name.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's
Absolutely.
really, there's a lot that can happen that can be damaging, like, to a young brand.
Absolutely. And to share further, that challenging or fighting that cease and desist actually ended up costing us,
Yep.
I think, close to $18,000 or $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
If only we had just spent, the couple $1,000s to, like, trademark our name properly and do it the right way with, an attorney. If only we'd done it the right way from the beginning, it would have saved us thousands of dollars in the long run. Thousands.
Yeah.
And then we were in the negative on something that we had never accounted for.
Right. And actually, like, with DIY, so it's been shown that when you use an attorney, there's like a 50% higher chance that you will get the registration. So this is a true story. Last night, I got an email from someone that said that they did a DIY trademark, and they got this office action, and they're like, I need help on this office action. I don't know what to do. And the office action is like 5 issues, which is a lot. Like, if they're citing, the examiner citing 5 different problems with the application, that's a lot. And I had to be honest with the person, like, I don't think that you're going to get this. Like, you can't overcome this. And it would have been solved. It would not be in the situation if you would have done the search, because, like, the search is going to tell you who else is out there. And yeah, so it's sad, because they could have actually, the money to fix it is more expensive than to just do the
And I hope anyone who's listening, I'm sharing this from personal experience as a founder who bootstrapped her business. It hurts. It hurts. I wish, like learn from me and just do it the right way from the beginning. Don't try and do it yourself. Don't try and do it using, like, LegalZoom or any of the online tools. Like, just get somebody that is in your corner that can take care of this for you from A to Z. Because it's so important. And also, you can't get on Amazon without a trademark. You can't go into big wholesalers, big box retailers without a trademark. Right. All of these, it, like, trickles to all of these marketing and, sales and biz dev dollars that, it impacts everything going forward in terms of sales and marketing.
Yeah. And the thing with LegalZoom and some of these online companies, they're more like document prep companies, I would say, meaning, like, you tell them, I'm doing this, you fill out a form, and they do it. There's no counseling. Like, there's no one to say, like, you really should think about this, or, this is not going to get through for this, or the probability is really low. I mean, that there's so much value in that, because of course, like, they're just going to do whatever you tell them, and you might not really realize, or how many classes you need to be in. And there's just a lot of nuance to trademark law that people, it's not just filling out a form. There's a lot there that is important. And that's where the value is in having, an attorney help you.
Yeah, there's like there's strategy.
Yes,
Really, it comes down to the strategy,
exactly.
because there might be a step-by-step in how to fill it out, but it's looking at having somebody with that breadth of experience be able to say, well, actually, if you wait a month to do this in use,
Right,
or versus
exactly.
another option, or maybe just do this class versus this class. There's so
Yes.
many different factors to consider that if you're just following a step-by-step on how to fill out a form, you're missing all of that strategy.
Yeah.
So, no, go ahead.
No, so actually something else that came up also, this was last week, that I find that this happens a lot. So somebody did a DIY and their office action was not as bad, but they ended up like, they were in all of these classes and they spent so much money on the class filing fees that didn't make any sense. Like, they could have. So that's just another example. Like, they wasted so much money when that didn't make sense for them to even be in those classes. Or they say, like, I don't know why I did this class, but we're actually not going to do this anymore. So I don't need this. Or like, now what do I do? And I'm like, well, you have to, it's just, yeah. So there's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know the importance of trademarking. Are there any sort of other common mistakes you see, young founders make when it comes to legal protections?
Yeah, I mean, it's really all the steps. Like, they just don't do the steps that are necessary. Like, from the beginning of like the foundational part, the IP part. I mean, the other thing, with beauty, is not only your name, trademark, but there's other things that you can do. Your logo, product names. I mean, these big, corporations, they have like thousands of trademarks. Every single product that comes out of Revlon, Estee Lauder, they're all registered. So sometimes, with beauty founders, we say, okay, like, should I register the product name? And then that's also like the strategy. Like, okay, well, you should probably do the name first. But if you have a really, hero product, then it makes sense to do the product as well. Because, you want to protect that, if that's, something that is
absolutely
important,
especially if it's a cool phrase or like a very like catchy phrase, or it's something that you're becoming known for, or you think you'll become known for.
Yeah.
And so tell me more about, the process of choosing a name. Are there any tips or strategies that you can share with our audience on, as they're kind of starting that naming process? Like, any recommendations, resources, tips that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, so generally the USPTO does not want to see descriptive mark. So they will generally refuse a mark that's descriptive. So a descriptive mark is something that will describe the product or service that you have. So something like, if you're a nail salon, and the name is Lovely Nails, no, that's descriptive. It's generic. And that happens a lot too. Like, I see a lot of those names.
Yes. Same.
Or like, I don't know, wild fragrance or fresh, something like that. It's just not going to go through.
Yeah.
The other thing, actually, which is interesting, do not put organic in your name, because you're going to have a problem with that. In the brand name that you want to trademark, you're going to have an issue with that, with the examiner. So,
why is that?
Because they claim that it's misleading. So I just saw this in an office action too. They claim that it's misleading because they want you to change the description. So then you would have to change. This particular examiner wanted every product that was listed in the description to say organic before it. So like organic bath bomb, organic fragrance, it was just, but that didn't make sense for that client.
Right.
So just avoid it. Don't put that in the brand name. I mean, you could put that in your ads or your description. I mean, and that's a whole other thing about like clean and beauty and organic. I mean,
Yes.
that's a whole other
Regulations.
regulation, the
Yep.
MOCRA, which
Yep.
we can.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what are some, like, when you're, as a small brand, who are, or founders who are already running a small brand, what are some red flags or legal gaps they should look for that might be holding them back from scaling up? So as they're thinking about expanding into big box retailers, as they're thinking about maybe expanding internationally, maybe there's other scenarios that you think of in terms of scaling up. What are some of those, conflict moments or moments where, oh, I should really take this legal step first?
Yeah, I mean, sticking with the IP protection. So if you're expanding, then that's when you need to do an audit and see what is the IP that you have. Okay. Like, so in the beginning, you're going to do your brand name, fine. But then as you're growing, there's going to be more. There's going to be so much more that you have done, so many products that you've come out with. Maybe you have a slogan now, maybe you have a logo that you really like. And so you need, like, let's look at everything and let's see, these are the things that we should protect. There's also, I don't do patent work, but in beauty, formulation, some of them can be patented. So then we look at that. Like, should you, talk to a patent attorney and let's see if this is something that, you can protect. And especially if you're going internationally, you wouldn't, trademark is only good in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going, to an international market, you need the trademark there. So you need to expand there and do that.
Talk us through that process. What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's they make it a little bit easy. I mean, it depends where you are and where you want to go, I should say. And so every country, you would need a registration. The EU is good because you could get just an EU mark, and you could be registered in the EU countries. There are, certain ways to kind of do several countries in one application. And there's different rules, like in every country has different rules. Like here you have to show use in the US, and in some countries you don't have to show use. So so it depends. And that's a question of like, should I do it in this country? Well, what are you doing there? Are you have, a presence there? Are you just selling in retail there? What are the kinds of things that you're doing in this country? And then we would, determine, does it make sense for you to protect yourself there?
So in the event that a brand is shipping internationally, but isn't necessarily selling in retailers, would it behoove them to then get an international mark to the countries that they are selling into or like shipping to?
So I would ask, like, what's the revenue that is going overseas? I mean, if it's a large amount of your sales that are going to, the UK, then maybe you should, because now you do have a presence because so many people are buying from you. But if you just have, the one-off international customers throughout the year, then probably not. So it depends on the brand and what they're doing.
Got it. Okay. Can we walk back to the manufacturing conversation? Because I think this is so important. I feel like this keeps coming up recently. And so I'd love to spotlight this a little bit more. What do you typically, what's your typical process, or how do you support a client who is working with a formulator to create a formulation for them? And then do you advise typically that they own that formula outright? Do you advise against that, maybe buying that at a later point? What do you recommend?
So the best case scenario is that you own the formula, but it's not always feasible because that's very expensive to do. If you can do it, that's yes, because if you own that formula, you can move to a different manufacturer. So like that happens too. Like sometimes I'll be working with a client and like we're doing something, with their branding, and I say, okay, like, are you ready now to launch? Like, where is it? And they said, oh, I had to change manufacturers because for whatever reason, they weren't doing something right and I didn't like them. So now I moved to somebody else. If they own your formula, then how do you do that? Right? Like, then you have to go to another manufacturer and like, it's just, so if you can own it, that's the best case scenario. You can't always do that. But, you have to then look at what does the agreement say? Like, you would have a license to use the formula. And, so the ownership piece is very important to know, like, what is the ownership of this formula, and can I take it somewhere? What can I do with it? Do they own it outright? Sometimes it's like mixed. Sometimes like they use some of theirs, and then there's like some unique things that are just, your part of your formula. So it's like, it can be different things, but you have to know what it is that you are buying and what are you paying for.
Right. And I think this is, I do know that a lot of founders, especially if they're first-time business owners, aren't aware that they're not owning the formula.
Right.
They don't know that they're signing a contract that says that the manufacturer owns the formula. And you're right. I mean, what if oftentimes, and this happens very often, where you do have to move manufacturers because for whatever reason the relationship sours or it's not a good fit or for other reasons, and then what? And I imagine, yes, it's costly to own the formula outright, but it's also potentially even more costly to try and buy it later. Like, let's say you do get successful and you're now like this manufacturer seeing that you're catching successes left and right and growing. What is that cost going to look like down the road? And it's kind of assessing that risk of, do I invest in this now or do I invest more? Probably, I imagine later down the road.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. I mean, that's something that, and if you're pre-launch, you're new. I mean, you don't think of that, or you think I can't afford to do that, or I'm just going to do, I'm just going to use this form. I'm going to do private label. And it's a risk that you take, and you have to kind of think about that if that's how you want to, start off the business.
Yeah. I've had a couple of brands that they, started out, with a private label manufacturer, and are having to kind of rework formulas in order to own their formula outright. That's definitely, there's been I would say a handful of situations that I've encountered with some of our brands that had to do that. And it's a process. It's definitely a process. So what would you say, are there any like legal myths in the beauty or legal world that you wish founders would stop believing in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, maybe now's a good time to talk about MOCRA, which I find that, when I talk to small businesses about MOCRA, they kind of like don't pay attention or think it's not a big deal, or I'm so small, this is not going to affect me, or nobody's going to come and find me. So, but, it's, MOCRA is real. MOCRA is already here. You should already be complying with it. Even though you're small, you don't have to comply with everything, but there are requirements that you have to follow, and it affects your packaging. It's going to affect your labels. So yeah, I mean, really pay attention to that. I find that small business or new or pre-launch, they don't really spend a lot of time on that part.
Or, a lot of them don't know about it. Or no, go ahead.
You know what? They rely on the manufacturer. That's what they do. So the manufacturer will say, oh yeah, like we're compliant with FD&C, we're compliant with MOCRA, but are they? I mean, I can tell you manufacturers do not know everything about MOCRA either, because they have to be registered. they're supposed to be registered. They have requirements as well. And I've had people say, oh, my manufacturer said like they think they're compliant, but they don't know. And what do they need to do? So don't rely on that either. I mean, I know you can, I mean, your manufacturing contract could say that they're doing the manufacturing, they're doing the filling, they're doing the packaging, the testing. I mean, they could do a lot of different things, but, have somebody that really understands the regulations and the laws, really just do an audit for you. I mean, that's, I do that as well. Like, let me look at your labels, make sure they're compliant. Are you doing everything that you need to do with MOCRA? So, make
That's
sure
so good
that
to know.
you're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, because and then there's also founders and brands that are getting started at home or home lab, and that's just no longer really compliant under MOCRA.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of founders like they may have heard about that, but they're not realizing like the importance and
yeah. And
the importance of that.
the thing also with MOCRA is like you talked about earlier, trickling down like from retailers. That's going to start happening. That has already happened. Like if you're going to try to get in somewhere, they're going to ask you, are you compliant with MOCRA? Is your facility compliant with MOCRA?
Correct.
So like you need to do that. You need to know.
So would you say for those founders who are homegrown, DIYing it in their home lab, would you say like now's the time, if they haven't already, to move to a manufacturer?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think it's going to depend on it's dependent, I would say, on each person, because it depends on how big you are, where are you selling? Are you selling online? And I mean, people are going to say, well, people are taking a risk in doing that. They say, I'm just going to take the risk because I'm small. So yeah, I mean, you should be, because your facility is supposed to be registered, under MOCRA as well. And small businesses do not have to register their products unless there are certain caveats, like if it's like gets very close to the eye, for example, if it's injected. So there are some caveats to that. So you may have to actually register your product, even though you're small, if you fall into those categories. And then you can't register the product unless your facility is registered. So like, there's a lot of, because you need a number, you need their number, their FEI number, in order to even register your product.
This is such an eye-opening conversation. I hope everyone who's listening is looking to professionalize their businesses. If they're considering, if you're considering getting into the beauty space, or you're already operating as a brand, making sure you are getting compliant with MOCRA, as well as making sure you have, the IP of your business. And then also talk to us about, okay, let's say a brand is ready to sell, right? Let's say they're done. They're ready to kind of hang their cap and say, all right, I'm ready to sell this business. Is that something that you deal with or work with? Do you support brands in selling their businesses?
Yeah.
And what do they need to have and be prepared for?
Yeah. I mean, we do, we do business like purchases and sales. I mean, they're not even going to put an offer on you if you do not have like all of this foundational stuff. If you're not compliant, if you don't have an, IP, they're not even going to look at you to buy you. So that's why, that's a big reason of why you should do this. Even if you think, oh, I'm so small, but you're not going to be small forever. And like, you may decide that you want to sell, in 5 to 10 years.
And don't start with the intent. Like, I always want to encourage our founders, like, don't, if you're going to start, do it right. If you're going to do something, do it right. Do it right from the beginning.
Exactly.
And, if you're going to start a business, then who's saying and stopping you from believing that you're actually going to have a business that's a real business that's going to sell down the road, or maybe you pass it on, or you keep it for a long time, and it, fuels your lifestyle, right? Like, why start a business thinking small about it? I guess is where I'm coming from, is like, we might as well see the opportunity in what we're creating, and really it's like a child, right? We don't birth a child being like, well, I just wanted to stay small and and uneducated. I'm not, or whatever it is, like we, unnourished, right? Like we're going to feed it, we're going to teach it, we're going to raise it, we're going to nurture that child, right? And it's the same thing with the business. We don't start a business thinking, oh, it's just this little thing that's not going to mean anything or go anywhere.
Yep.
At least that's my perspective on it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have that conversation. I mean, that's, I have that a lot, like as a business attorney, because you're telling people what they need to comply with and what they need to do. And then ownership is about risk. So then, but I do find like a lot of founders saying, okay, like I'll do that next year. I don't need to do that right now. But like, that's not, if you're a founder that's running like a successful business, they don't see it that way. Like they're not going to do that. They're going to make sure that they're doing everything right, that they're doing, and
Correct.
you can tell the difference, right? Like who,
correct.
There are founders that are like, yes, I absolutely need to do that.
Absolutely.
So it's
absolutely. So we might as well like set it up the right way. And it's almost like a respect to ourselves too, as founders, or a belief in ourselves more than anything, a respect for ourselves, a belief in ourselves that what we are building will matter and make a bigger impact in this world. So let's set it up the right way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So switching gears, I love some of the things that I love and that you do on social media is you do these like case studies on brands, like celebrity brands, like things that went wrong, like legally, with all the sort of new legal challenges of the emerging beauty brands, celebrity brands. Can you talk us through a couple case studies and what went wrong or what they could have done differently and what the outcome was?
Yeah. So one I'm thinking of that always jumps out is it's not beauty, but it's the Haley Page case. Do you know that one about she was a founder of a bridal she was a bridal designer, and she was purchased from a larger brand, and they bought her all of her IP, obviously, like her branding, like the name of her business was Haley Page Design or Haley Page or just Haley Page. So that was registered. They bought that, and then they stopped her from using Haley Page. Like she could not use Haley Page on her social media. She could not use it on any branding. She could not open a business or do anything commercially related with that name. And
Absolutely.
It was like this huge issue, this controversy. Everybody, had their opinion about it. How can they stop her from using her name? So then, because of that, I do counsel people, don't name the brand your name, right?
Yeah.
Because it happened with Bobbi Brown.
Bobbi Brown
had happened to her, happened to Kate Spade. So that's real. Like that's an issue. And like that was ongoing for a long time. In the end, like I think she got access to it like for certain things, like she got it back in like one of the later court cases, like but only for social media and brand. Like she still cannot open a business and name it Haley Page, even though it's her own name.
Right.
So,
and think about the legal ramifications or like the costs involved with fighting that and just to get her name for social media.
I know. No, that's huge. And people were shocked about that. And like with Bobbi Brown, she had an NDA a non-compete for like 25 years.
Yes.
And then she started Jones Road after that was over. But she still couldn't name it with her name. She couldn't use Bobbi Brown.
The same thing happened with Jo Malone.
Yeah.
Like when she sold her brand, she actually, because I read her autobiography, and she spoke about how that period of time was so difficult because, her whole identity was wrapped up in, Jo Malone, this business that she'd started. And then all of a sudden she sold the business and, all of a sudden it was like, what do I do? Like, and she went through like a period, I think, of like depression or trying to find herself.
Crisis.
And especially even more of an identity crisis if your name is, if you can't even use your likeness, right?
Right.
So that's a good example And yes,
the other one is the Sephora case, which that's interesting because Sephora had a program called Clean at Sephora.
yes,
And they listed in their marketing what made it clean. So they said like these products that we are highlighting are free from like parabens, phthalates,
right.
other things. I can't think of all of them right now. And somebody filed suit against them because there was something they said that was not clean in the product. There was some like chemical in there, some preservative, and this plaintiff was saying, this is false marketing, false advertising because this is not clean. But then the court actually sided with Sephora, which is so interesting.
Interesting. Tell us more.
Because they said, well, there's no definition of clean. There's no definition of organic, federal definition.
Right.
But Sephora did say what their definition of clean is. So they told you what it is. They didn't say that it's all natural, free from every preservative, whatever. They said it's free from these things. So now you say like, wow, like, so anybody can make up their own definition of anything and of clean,
and not be held
organic,
accountable.
and not be right, and not be so. I don't know. We'll see, like if that's overturned, or what happens with that, or if there's something else that comes up. But that was really interesting. But the court never said. They never gave us a definition of clean. So that still does not exist. I don't think that's going to exist.
Right.
But that's it's interesting. It's great for Sephora.
Right. Huh. Yeah, and clean and is so subjective. And every single retailer has their own definition. So yeah, I don't imagine that being, trademarked
and that's why they're going to continue, because the Sephora case is basically saying yes, like any retailer, if you're calling these products clean, go ahead, as long as you're telling the consumers what your definition is, then it's fine.
Right. Huh. And wasn't there a case too that you did a case study about with Skims? Wasn't there something with Skims as well? Or
yes. Oh yeah, that was a really small brand that had the name, and then the Kim Kardashian Skims, like they bullied her. They just bullied her and just threw money at her. And I think she ended up giving consent to them to use the name, or they basically just bullied her right down. Same thing with Rhode Skin did that.
Right.
With Rhode, the clothing company. So the clothing company fought back against Hailey Bieber. And Hailey, I think that's still ongoing. I don't think there's any resolution to that, actually. I have to look at that. But Hailey Bieber did the same thing. Like she's just no, she's just throwing money and saying, no, fight me for it, basically.
Right.
Saying, which is a lot of money. It's very expensive to do that.
Right. Of course. And what is your take on trademark bullying? Because I feel like that's, from a founder side, obviously, like if you're a small fish, that, if someone's trademark bullying you, that sucks.
Yeah.
And on the attorney side, it's like, yeah, well, these brands are doing their job to protect their marks. What's your take on trademark bullying?
I do it. If you don't enforce your mark, you can lose rights to it down the line, because somebody can say, well, this person never enforced their rights. There's so many other marks that are so similar. They sat on their rights. They never did anything. So they've diluted the mark. The mark is now diluted because there's hundreds of marks that are similar. So yes, in that respect, yes, you have to enforce your mark. You have to do, but yeah, I always feel, bad for the underdog that is a smaller brand that doesn't have the money to do it. So I do get that a lot. Why should I do this, if I'm small? But you can't think like that, because the truth is you don't know that that's whatever happened to you. So don't think I'm going to get, bullied. You need to have that piece of paper. If you did not have that registration, you would have absolutely no right. They would just like, they don't even have to even talk to you or come to you. And like, as a smaller brand, like there's things that you could do. If you have a trademark bully that's bigger than you could ask for money. You could say, okay, I'll give this to you, but give me something for it. Pay me.
Right.
So there are things that you can do, but if you don't have that registration, there's nothing you can do about it.
That's a great point. Like you could, there's definitely, and in my case, like with Noma and with Noma, there were definitely things that ended up trading. Like, you can do this, but you can't do that. Right. Or like, well, what if we do this, and then we get this.
That's common. Yeah.
Yep. And there was like a negotiating of the terms. And so it wasn't
like the class, the description.
Yes, exactly.
Like, you only do this and I'll do this. That's very common.
It's not so black and white. And that's why this is so important to have someone in your corner, handling that, because they can get really creative and be like, well, here's like what we can offer, but here's what we'll have in our back pocket if that doesn't go well, or here's plan B and C.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. So Antonella, to kind of wrap everything up, what would you say is the number one advice that you would give for our listeners who, as you know, it's beauty brand founders, they're bootstrapping their businesses, they're either in the stage of like launching, growing, or scaling their brands. What advice would you give?
Well, I would say budget for all of these things that I have talked about. Like, put it in your budget. Like, make sure that you are doing the IP protection, you're doing the business foundation stuff, you're doing the regulatory check. Like, have somebody check for you. Like, make sure that your labels are correct. Make sure that you're following MOCRA, because MOCRA also has requirements about like safety and adverse event reporting, and you have to have a certain form and that you have to fill out. Like, there's just like, you need to know all of that stuff. So put that in the budget. It's not like flashy. It's not as exciting as doing the marketing portion of it. Like, I totally get it. But if you do not have that, you're risking the whole entire brand. Like, the whole entire business that you're putting money into is at risk because you just didn't do those things in the beginning.
Absolutely. I 1000% agree. From personal experience, I learned the hard way that how important trademarking and owning your name and owning the IP of your business, how very important that is.
Yeah.
So thank you, Antonella. Thank you for sharing everything with us, and for giving us this very sort of deeper look into the legalities of starting a brand and what those foundational elements are and how we can really protect ourselves as founders. And what I want to encourage everyone who's listening is, treat your business as, nourish it, foster it with what it needs to really grow and be something that does reach more people and does have a bigger impact. Look to really think bigger and have your business can have more potential.
Absolutely.
In the future. Like, try not to be short-sighted.
Yes.
And really looking at what you want to build here. Like, you can make a huge impact in the world with your business, even if you are bootstrapping it. I think, Antonella, you can attest to this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the businesses that you work with are bootstrapping, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are pre-launch and they know, that they need to take care of this stuff. And it just like, it gives your business credibility too. Like, if you have somebody review your contract, I need to send this to my attorney, or, it's just, it gives you credibility. If you're not doing that, you can always tell the people that are not doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast. This is so fun, and always enjoy our conversations. I feel like I always learn something new. And until next time.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.